Hi everyone and welcome back to Alan's Aquatics. In today's video we're going to be talking about the nitrogen. So that is how you cycle your tank to keep your fish nice and healthy in the water that they live in. So let's start off with what is the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is how fish waste is turned into safer compounds and then how we remove it from our tanks. So our fish produce waste in the form of ammonia, so that's fish poo, fish flea. And there's certain bacteria that turn ammonia into nitrite, which then there are certain bacteria that turn nitrite into nitrate. And that beneficial bacteria is really important because that's how we create an ecosystem in our tanks. So there are a few ways of doing this. So number one is a fishless cycle. So that is where you set up a tank, you leave it for 6 weeks, and you add ammonia to the tank and you wait for that bacteria to build up in that tank. I personally never use this method because I don't really feel comfortable adding chemicals to my tank that I don't really know what was going on. So the other methods of doing that are a fish in cycle. So that's where you set up your tank, you add some fish, some hardier fish to the tank, and then you make sure that you're checking the parameters every day to make sure that if anything's out of whack that you change some water so that your fish remains safe. So that's what I did the first time I ever set up a tank, because I didn't really know what I was doing. Is it the safest way to do things? No. Did I lose any fish? No. So I took some advice from a fish store that I went to, and they said to add some fish, some hardy fish, and just make sure that you keep an eye on the parameters, and when they get out of whack, change some water and keep going until eventually you see there's no ammonia, no nitrite, and minimal nitrate. And that's what I did. So basically what you're doing is you're waiting long enough for the colonies to build up in all of the areas, so they build up on the substrate, on the plants, on the decor, on the filter. And the filter is the main important part of this because it's where the water is dragged through. So I use sponge filters, and they're great because they have a lot of surface area for the bacteria to grow on. So I highly recommend, if you're cycling your first tank, to use a sponge filter because they're just easily the easiest filter to cycle. You've cycled your first tank, the easiest thing to do then is to add extra filters to the tanks, because next time you want to set up a tank you can just use one of those filters because they're already seeded with bacteria. See, in this tank there's a spare filter there that's not being used, and this is his filter that is being used, and that filter at the back there is gathering bacteria. It has bacteria growing on it, and it means that next time I want to start a tank I can use that filter to start that tank that already has pre-seeded bacteria in it, which means that I will have already cycled my tank. So if you are going to do a fish in cycle, I highly recommend that you use plants in your tanks because they drastically lower the amount of waste that is in your tank. So they use nitrates in order to live. So that is why I use a lot of plants, because they help with making your water quality better. Let's just go and have a look at the big display. These plants are growing because of the waste that the fish are producing. I don't add any chemicals to this tank apart from a minimal dose of CO2 alternative once a week. And these plants are growing like crazy. This one here, this crypt is growing out, crazy. The Amazon swords at the back, they're growing crazy. The Anubias, that's growing crazy, and they're a slow grower. So, they're growing because of the fish waste in the tank, and it's about creating an ecosystem in your tank. And now I know, we talk about creating an ecosystem in the tank. Would you really see bubbles in the wild? No, you wouldn't. But this is the way that we can keep our fish healthy, keep the water oxygenated, and actually, it's about being as close to these things as you can. It's great detail about what the nitrogen cycle is or how it works, but that's basically my 2 cents on it, and actually what I do to cycle my tanks. I just, now all I have now is take a spare filter out of one of my tanks and put it in a new tank, and that's because I plan ahead. So I always have at least 1 or 2 or 3 spare filters in my bigger tanks, in my breeding tanks, because they are gathering bacteria for new tanks. And you want to always be prepared, because there might be suddenly you need to there's a fight or something in one of the tanks and you need to set up a hospital tank, or you need to separate some fry from the parents because they're going to get eaten. You want to make sure that you're always prepared, and that is my recommendation to anybody who's starting a fish room. If you're doing a one-off tank, there's lots of things that you can do. You can go to your local fish shop and ask for some used media, some bio rings or something like that, and that will help add to your cycle. and that's something that I would suggest doing. Now, not all fish shops are going to do that. They're not all going to be willing to give you cycled media, so there is other things that you can use. So I don't use them anymore because I personally don't need to, but you can buy bacteria in a bottle. So Seachems do a product stability, and it's really good. So I have used it in the past. That is what I used when I did my fish in cycles. So it's already bacteria in the bottle, and you add that to the tank, and then that helps to seed the bacteria into the mix. You can also get a product called from Fritz, which we don't really sell in the UK, but you can get them online on Amazon. So Fritz Turbo Start, it is literally bacteria in the bottle. You have to keep it in the fridge in order for it to work. So this stuff does work. Like, it is a cycling media. It will help to cycle your tank immediately. So just to recap for today, basically we talked about the nitrogen cycle and how I cycle my tanks. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave them below. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and I shall see you in my next video.